Vaisala's origins date back to the 1930s, when Professor Vilho Vaisala invented some of the operating principles of a radio sound. The company's very first order for 20 radiosondes was sent to MIT in 1936. Active cooperation with the American meteorological community has been an important part of Vaisala's journey ever since. AMS is an important influencer and driver in atmospheric research and development of a modern weather, water and climate community, not only in North America, but also globally. Every day our lives are affected by weather and climate. Natural disasters can change the planet, putting people and property at risk. From hailstorms, droughts and severe winter weather to typhoons, hurricanes and floods, natural disasters impact every region across the globe, and their impact on the economy can be equally extreme. We live in a world in which we need to solve more and more challenging and complex problems. Vaisala is investing heavily in promoting research on extreme weather. As Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas in September 2019, Vaisala's systems were put up to the test. With the help of Vaisala's solutions, more accurate information and alerts could be sent out. If the hurricane hadn't been well monitored and timely alerts given in advance, the consequences could have been much worse. These are challenges where we all need to work in active cooperation, and we cheer AMS on for their next 100 years of contributing to better and sustainable future.
Welcome everyone to the centennial of the American Meteorological Society. So we're beginning a week of celebration and science and getting to know your neighbour. So we're going to begin today with a talk and then a discussion with an amazing woman. So Gina McCarthy, until recently, was a professor of practice public health in the Department of Environmental Health at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and the director of the Center for Climate Health and Global Environment at Harvard Chan School of Public Health. In this capacity, she led the development of the school strategy in climate science, health, and sustainability. She strengthened the climate science and health curriculum and was a liaison with climate sciences across the university. Just last week, and while continuing her affiliation with Harvard, Gina has taken on a new role as President and CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council. Gina McCarthy has been a leading advocate for common sense strategies to protect public health and the environment for more than 30 years. She served under President Barack Obama as the 13th Administrator of the EPA from 2013 to 2017. Her tenure as EPA Administrator heralded a paradigm shift in national environmental policy, expressly linking it with global public health. She led EPA initiatives that cut air pollution, protected water resources, reduced greenhouse gases, and strengthened chemical safety to better protect more Americans, and especially the most vulnerable, from negative health impacts. McCarthy signed the Clean Power Plan, which set the first ever national standards for reducing carbon emissions from existing power plants, underscoring the country's commitment to domestic climate action and spurring international efforts that helped secure the Paris Climate Agreement. Gina McCarthy worked with the United Nations and the World Health Organization on a variety of efforts and represented the US on global initiatives to reduce high-risk sources of pollution. A longtime public servant, Gina was previously Assistant Administrator for the EPA Office of Air Pollution for Air and Radiation, Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection, Deputy Secretary of Massachusetts Office of Commonwealth Development, and Undersecretary of Policy for the Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. You can see we're not kidding when we say long history of public service. She's strengthened collaborative efforts with public health agencies and organisations across the US to identify and reduce threats to human health from harmful air pollution, including carbon pollution, that fuels climate change by updating health and technology-based emission standards, establishing greenhouse gas standards for cars, trucks, promoting energy efficiency and alternative fuels, and mitigating harmful exposures to indoor air pollution. After the Obama administration, McCarthy became a senior leadership fellow at both the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. In addition to her work at Harvard, McCarthy serves on the board of the Energy Foundation and CERES. We congratulate her on beginning this month as President and CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council. So, welcome, Gina.
Thanks, Jenny, and boy, do I feel old. Maybe you're right, I am a little long in the tooth, but I thank you for allowing me to be here, and I want to thank the members at AMS for letting me come and celebrate your 100th anniversary. Nowadays, I find myself relishing every opportunity I can to celebrate anyone or anything older than I am. I know this is the start of AMS's second century, but it wasn't all that long ago that you were pretty low-tech. You know, when I was a kid, one of my heroes was Don Kent. Does everybody remember Don? At least in this area we do. I watched him on my 3-channel black and white television, standing in front of a blackboard with a few pieces of chalk, at least 2 for redundancy. He would talk about low pressure and high pressure areas and other things that no one really understood then. And my guess is that nobody really understands today. And he'd tell us what the likelihood was that it would rain tomorrow or when the snow that was burying us during the blizzard of '78 might begin to abate. And while he may not have been right most of the time or even much of the time, who knows? My parents never missed watching Don Kent because you know why? Because he was talking about our weather. He was talking about our lives, something really meaningful to us to help us prepare for rain or snow or cold or heat or wind or hurricanes. He was essentially part of the family. We thought he cared about us. I'm sure that he did. This was one of the first times that I understood that science could be so relevant and so meaningful and so personal in our lives beyond medical science, which was then really still in its infancy. And now you have all your fancy visuals, your computerized graphics, your complex analysis, and even Doppler radars, which weather people say at least 25 times every time they're giving a weather report. And I still have no idea what the hell a Doppler radar is, but it sounds incredibly great. And you guys still remain the coolest dudes and dudettes ever. Well, maybe not Don Kent cool, but you're still pretty good. Because you produce and deliver science that matters. You know, I have visited the Weather Channel in Atlanta a bunch of times to talk about climate change on Weather Geeks and other shows with Marshall and others, and no one there called into question my sanity or my patriotism, which made it way more fun than congressional hearings. Because at those hearings, I would be browbeaten by folks who I bet watched Don Kent way back when, and likely watched Al Roker or Jim Cantore or Dylan Dreyer or Stephanie Abrams now, But somehow they just couldn't get their heads around the issue of climate change. Well, now they got to get their heads out of that and into the real world. And that's what today, for me, is all about. Today we have no choice but to get our heads around climate change. Not just a few of us, but all of us. And not just politicians and scientists, but normal human beings if you have ever met a normal human being. We just do not have the luxury to keep denying overwhelming science or disregarding the need to act if we hope to retain, which are absolute human necessities that are at risk in a changing climate, our climate crisis. Clean air and water, fertile land, and special places that we all cherish. Our communities where we can feel safe and secure, with a roof over our head, with food on the table, protected from pollution, and resilient in the face of storms, floods, droughts, and wildfires that challenge our health and our well-being. Not to mention whole communities and whole island nations like the Maldives, and even continents like Australia that seem to be right now the picture of a hideous sci-fi inferno. In short, we need to redesign our world to one that keeps us healthy and safe and does not leave increasing numbers of the poor and the disenfranchised left behind. So while we have done a hell of a job getting people's attention by covering hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and droughts and wildfires and other disasters, it is time. It's time to shift gears to start motivating people to act, not to have their heads in the sand. We have to empower them, not frighten them. We have to build hope. We have to envision a future together, and we have to build it together. I know that sounds incredibly daunting to all of us who know the extent of the challenge that we're facing. But let's not forget that way back when, right here in this country, some of the preeminent pollution capitals of the world existed right here. In California, school was canceled for smog days. Orange County got its name probably from the color of the sky, not the fruit that was grown there. Today we point fingers at Beijing and New Delhi, but you should have seen Pittsburgh in its heyday. You should have seen that little Boston Harbor out there because it was a sewer, not the shining example of this city's rebirth as it is today. So in the 60s and 70s, as pollution worsened all across the country, so did the pressure that millions of people put on who were calling for change, who knew we were heading for a future that was disastrous. So Earth Day was born, and the US EPA was created by one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States of America, and a Republican to boot, and you are right, it is funny, that was Richard Nixon. I was just kidding on the greatest part. And the US Congress passed laws like the Clean Air Act that paved the way for new technologies, new products, new procedures, new ways of thinking and living that have made our world cleaner and healthier. So here you are, 50 years later, I am the head of the Natural Resources Defense Council, and you're not. And what do you think I am going to do today? Do you think I'm going to hide my head in the sand? Do you think I'm going to call it a day and give up on the future? No, I don't think so. Just because climate change is really, really hard, well, get over it. It's time to buckle up, folks, because we have a journey we have to take together. Look, I know that the Obama-era rules and the science that guided those actions, well, it's all under attack. Duh, how could I not know that? But I am still going to be here as a climate optimist. I know I got them over the finish line. I know that those rules followed the law and they followed the science. And I know I worked for years, just as Jane Lubchenco, my colleague, worked for years to make people understand the challenges we were facing and to do something about it. We learn from the public. We listen to the people that we regulate. And we designed and passed reasonable, cost-effective rules that have helped to support what is truly a remarkable clean energy revolution. So I know that EPA leadership today has an incredibly difficult row to hoe if they expect to roll back all those rules, because they gave people more ability to live healthier lives while our economy rebounded. And I know that NRD has sued EPA about 100 times since this administration came in, and they have a 90% success rate. Do you know why I'm at NRDC? That's why. And guess what? NRD is going to keep suing and we're going to keep winning if I have anything to say about it, and I do. And folks, don't forget that when Washington does not lead, when they fail to have a plan that moves this country forward on issues that threaten our lives and our livelihood, and even worse, when they have a plan to turn the clock back, the people in this country don't just sit around on our couch, turn on Netflix, watch 7 years of Games of Thrones, and eat ice cream. I tried that. It's painful. No, we step up and we do something. So let's stop being angry and stop being anxious. Let's raise hope together. Let's be climate optimists. If you haven't already, please find ways to get engaged. We need your voices in the mix. We simply can't turn our backs on all those amazing young people who are demanding climate justice. They're afraid that they don't have a future. They're talking about not having children because they can't see a path forward for themselves. We need to stand with them and forge that path forward. I visit a lot of colleges these days, and I go because I'm tired of them being angry and anxious, and I want to turn it into hope and constructive action. That's what you can help to happen. I tell them to take a break from watching the never-ending DC news. I let them know that when I wake up every morning, I often find my husband, Ken, whom I love dearly, grumbling and even yelling at himself about something he heard on CNN or MSNBC. Flip, 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 one or the other. So I tell them, you know, Ken, I do love you dearly. And then I lovingly tell him to shut the hell up and turn the TV off. And I offer some advice to the students that is very similar, because, you know, when you get your head out of Washington politics, you can begin to understand what's happening in the real world, because DC is not the real world. It never has been. Good things are happening in the real world. People care about clean air and clean water and safe places to live. They care and they need a stable climate. Democrats and Republicans. Hey, I worked for 6 governors. 5 of them were Republicans, and they were never thrilled about dirty air or water. Guess why? Their constituents didn't care for it. So let's get our heads out of partisan politics and let's work together. With the advent of market-winning renewable energy and energy efficiency programs, the clean energy train in this country and elsewhere has simply left the station, and it is not turning around, and it's not going to slow down. That is hopeful news for the 9 million people every year who die from pollution across the world, especially the 7 million who die from air pollution every year, especially the 93% of those victims who are unlucky enough to live in low-income or middle-income countries. And it's damn good news for the 4,000 kids who fall prey to asthma each year simply because of the unfortunate circumstance that they live along our major highways. We have the technology to save these lives today. We just need to work hard and stay committed to build the kind of communities that we would be proud to leave to our children and our grandchildren. Don't forget, when DC falls asleep, progress continues. In fact, sometimes it speeds up at other levels of government, and there are clear and remarkable signs that our democracy is waking up. States and cities are stepping up and they're taking charge. They're designing and they're pushing solutions that work. In time, they will drive federal action, but certainly not now or in the imminent future. So we have to get over that. We have to look at the women and the scientists who marched today. Who ever thought I'd see scientists marching? That one sign said it has to be desperate when geeks are forced to march. We have Black Lives Matter, we have the Me Too movement, we have the Sunrise Movement, we have people, young, old, and old Irish women like me, getting fed up, and we are speaking up. And today I'm pleased to say that most people in the United States fully understand three things about climate change, and you're going to repeat them after me because we're all going to be on the same page as you head into this conference. Are you ready? Number one, climate change is real. Not good enough. Climate change is real. Man-made emissions have caused it. That's why women need to rule the world. Say it! All right, that's a little bit of a joke, except that there's recent studies that show that women leaders are pushing harder and stronger actions than their male counterparts across the world. Doesn't it figure? Look, even look at the Democrats that are running for president. They're all trying to outdo one another to deliver the best climate plan. And I hope so, because my plan is to make sure that they feel the heat from the people in this country who care about their families and their children's future. So keep thinking, keep talking, and then do something. Did you know that 25 states across the U.S. have joined together and they've pledged to meet the Paris goals? Now, you may say, what's 25 states? That represents 55% of the U.S. population. If you join them together, they would be the third largest economy in the world. So don't tell me that the United States of America has given up this fight, or I should. We are just getting started, and hundreds of cities across the U.S. and beyond are also pledging to meet the Paris commitments. And they will continue to need our support. Climate change cannot be solved without you, without your knowledge, without your enthusiasm and your engagement. Just as these states and cities have pledged to be all in, you, I, all of us have to do the same. We don't need urban and rural communities that are in danger. We need them to be resilient in our changing climate. We need them to work together, and we need to rekindle our sense of community and our willingness to cut through partisan politics for the sake of ourselves, our families, our children. Isn't that what this conference is really now all about? Isn't it about you, scientists, researchers, analysts, broadcasters, bloggers, experts, whoever the hell you are out there? It's about you getting engaged, thinking about how to explain to people the difference between weather and climate. Because you can make all the difference in the world if you become active and engaged. You can be the voice of Dawn Kent in every family's head. And Lord knows the climate crisis needs more Dawn Kents and more voices in the mix. Because like it or not, you are trusted advisors. People do listen to you and will listen to you. You can help them understand climate, and you can explain to them that climate change is not a partisan political issue. It is pure and simply science. That's what it is. You can help push back when someone dismisses climate change by saying, oh, the climate is always changing. Oh, I hate that one. It just drives me crazy. You know I know that it's not about the fact that the climate is always changing. Duh, sure it is. But it's about the pace of the change that we see today and the way it's accelerating in an alarming way that we simply can't hold off adapting to try to ensure that we have a future on this planet. So my hope and plea is that during this gathering, you'll spark these conversations among all your colleagues, and you'll leave here committed and better prepared to work for more resilient communities, to inspire people to take action, and you yourself to demand action. You can help one another connect the dots between research and how to make it personal and relevant in the real world, because your voice matters. You can motivate action to build a better future. Look, I think people need new infrastructure investment. I think they need investment that actually makes sense to them, like renewable energy and transportation corridors that move people, goods, and services faster without relying on fossil fuels that are polluting our air, our rivers, and our streams. Have you driven through Boston lately? Don't try unless it's between the hours of 11:30 and 2. Beyond that, you can't get there from here. We have to do better. We have to have drainage systems that are updated based on today's storms so we can keep our water clean, safe, swimmable, and fishable. How does walkable and bikeable communities and neighborhoods sound to you? Or more trees and green spaces and cooling centers to protect our kids? Are these really bad things? Are these things we're going to reject? Does anybody dislike a tree or a playground? You know, we need to protect the elderly and the homeless from the heat stress we're already facing. And we need buildings that are efficient and resilient to climate impacts, that are located away from coastlines that will no longer be coastlines, and flood zones that are based on real data that exists today. Just think about this. Does anything I just say sound absolutely ridiculous or even that difficult to do? If everybody said it ought to be done? Does it seem like it will save money or cost money? Is it really going to be a sacrifice to move those things forward, even if climate change wasn't a threat? We are talking about moving towards a better future. What in God's name are we really fighting about? It's not that. It's not those steps. So we have to demand it together. So I am really not ready to stop fighting about climate change anytime soon. And I ask you to jump in as well, if you haven't already, because the climate fight really isn't, as some people suggest, about the planet. Because the climate fight is really about us. It's about saving us. The planet could care less if we exist on it. We care. In fact, I am quite convinced that the planet probably thinks of human beings as the most annoying species ever. We keep changing everything like idiots. If the planet had a head, it would be scratching it. Look, climate change is about our families. It's about our health. It's about our well-being. It's about my 3 children. And it's about my 2 grandchildren. And for me, and I'm sure for you, it just doesn't get any more personal than that. So if you are in the broadcast community and you decide to talk about climate change, then bless you. But why not show a picture of a kid with asthma rather than a glacier falling into the sea or a polar bear? All right, the NRDC logo is a polar bear, so you can actually use that every once in a while. You can help make climate change personal, real, understandable. You can make science work for all of us. Folks will speak up if you give them the knowledge and the information they need. They will challenge the status quo. They will help us rebuild our sense of community and keep our families safe in our ever-changing world. So stay hopeful. Keep your foot on the gas, accelerator, Put your faith in human ingenuity and entrepreneurship. That is how the United States of America and our countries work. That's how we all move forward. So let me end with a quote from my dad, since he's not here and he won't mind me updating his words to fit today's times. When I was a kid and complained about one thing or another, which admittedly happened quite a bit, my dad would listen for a while and then he'd put his hands up and he'd say something like, Gina, stop whining, pick up your big girl pants and do something. So that's what I'm telling you. Pick up your big girl pants, your big boy pants, or your gender neutral pants and go do something. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gina.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, after that inspiration, we've been asked to think about climate change, to think about our world in a different way to what we brought into the room. So we've now got time with Gina for a discussion. You'll see information about how to use an app to generate questions and send questions to us, and we're just going to have a conversation.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Gina.
I like that vest.
Thank you. It's kind of
did
practical.
anything or anyone have to die in order for
No.
Okay, good. Just checking.
No.
Just checking.
A whole lot of faux furs died in the making.
Just for the listening audience.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with something. I grew up in Australia, and as you said, an area the size of Delaware has already burned in Australia this summer, and we're not even to the bushfire season yet. So is that what it's going to take for people to really decide they need to do something?
Well, here, I've tried to look at what actually makes change happen. Because I honestly believe that we have lots of solutions that if we broadened the acceptance of those and demanded them, would be in a much better place. Would we be at the end of the line that we need to be? No. But it would build momentum. And I think the challenge we face is that where climate change is concerned, even its name sort of implies we can't do anything about it. And I think people have just, even with issues like you're talking about, I've looked at those pictures, they're extraordinary, and they're frightening. I just don't think they quite tell people that it's something they can do.
Yeah.
And I know that this administration is fighting a lot of the rules by saying, well, or citing of pipelines, well, that one pipeline's not going to make a difference. All you can do is actually reduce worldwide greenhouse gases by 1%. What good's that? Yeah. So somehow we need to figure out how to motivate people more broadly. And generally, people don't follow losers. They don't generally follow morose human beings. They generally follow people who say, we can do this. We've got to get to the moon, point at it, and say we're going to go there. And so I think we just need, in my world, I think we need to motivate change, not just by pointing at the problem, but by really pointing at solutions. They can change the world if we can build a big enough movement to do that.
Well, you did offer one suggestion. So how do we get women running the world? And I actually have that question also from a queer member of our community and from students. How do they help run the world?
I think they're beginning to take over the world. I just don't think they know that. It's not yet tag, you're it. We've screwed it up so much, now it's yours. I think it's more that if I look at where change has happened, it is young people. I've studied things, I'm at the School of Public Health, so I look at these things, and I've looked at tobacco and how it took us 40 years to figure out how to make that issue clear. But the real change came in people's behavior on smoking when the secondary smoke issue came up. when people realized that they were harming their own children with their habits, things changed. And so I think people care about doing the right thing. I think we need to mobilize that, and we need to let them know similarly that what they do can either make or break what happens in the world, and empower them to do it. And the only way I know how to do that is act like a little Pied Piper, play a good tune, let them know what they have to do, and start demanding it up. But I've learned a long time ago, and even through 8 years in government, I loved the time. We worked hard, we did a lot of good things. But most of what I did was based on stuff we did in states and cities. It never, the central government is not the place to start innovating. It's the place to start kicking them in the butt.
Well, so I've had people here are asking, how can I as an individual make a change? And given that there are so many scientists in the room, is it right for a scientist to politicize what they're saying?
No, I don't think you politicize it at all. I think part of the problem that we have is, at least in the US, and I know in Australia and other places, it's become, a very political issue. And if you think about it, when is the last time that a science issue became so partisan? That if you're a Democrat, you had to believe it. If you're a Republican here, you can't? What the hell is that?
I'm puzzled about how it became, how it flipped, how it started off with the Republicans leading in the EPA.
It's a good question. Well, honestly, if you look back, there's great data during Ronald Reagan's administration that they were looking at climate and the challenge of climate change. They just thought it was hundreds of years away. Oops, not quite. And so I do think I think we all have to reject the idea that climate change is a political issue or a partisan issue. The reason why your voice is so valuable is that you're a scientist. Just speak about the science. And just people will trust your judgment if you talk about what you know, not demand specific things of them, but just inform them. If people do believe scientists, I think the challenge that we face, and one of the reasons I went to Harvard School of Public Health, was to try to make sure that the students learned how to communicate, not in language of science, but in real language. Because it was great for Don Kent to come up and say, I think it's likely to rain tomorrow. That was better than what we have. But if you go, I think climate change is likely caused by humans, we're dead meat.
Yeah.
You got to be more colloquial in the way you communicate so people understand. Because hardly anybody remembers that the way we do science is to put a hypothesis out there and figure out what's closest and what, they just think we talk in facts, and we don't speak like that. And honestly, when you go to communities, you have to speak in language they understand, not language that's incorrect from a science perspective, but a more colloquial way of making the same point in whatever way you're comfortable with.
Well, many people are actually asking, how do I approach someone who's resistant to the idea that we can do something about climate change? So could you give us something more specific on how we might approach that?
Well, I think what I tried to do when I was speaking a little while earlier is give you some of the sort of more simple ways in which we can actually make lives better, that people won't argue about. I do not know how people in the city of Boston think they're going to get around if we don't invest more in public transportation. How are we going to get through the city? Yeah. It's just going to get busier and busier. So we have to think now about how to invest in that, because the timeline for those investments are rather long. And so I think you need to get very simple. I think you need to explain to people that we're not actually asking them to sacrifice. We are actually asking them to think about getting to a world that's a little bit better, our lives that are more community-based. Our lives, a place where there are more trees and green spaces, a place where the air pollution levels aren't so bad, a place where we actually can have food on the table that is nutritious and come from a farm that's local, or come from a farm that is regenerative, where they're investing in the soil instead of fossil fuel-based fossil fuel-based fertilizers and pesticides, or a place where, we're producing plastics that end up in our oceans. There's so many ways in which you could talk about the actions that make it seem reasonable and okay to do, and also something that people would be demanding even if climate didn't change.
Yep.
That's all I can think of, is to get way more concrete. Tell people that they can do this, reference the work that was done in the environment a long time ago, how we changed from rivers burning to the Cuyahoga being fishable today and swimmable. Come on, let's get real and give people real hope.
So I have a question I'm going to read verbatim. I'm a 10-year-old Australian guest at the AMS. My question is, how can we preserve our forests so that it won't burn? I'm thrilled we have a 10-year-old in the audience.
Well, they are the people that we're working for, aren't they? I think, well, there's a couple of things, and that is that obviously forests need to be nurtured like any other natural system. It's not just about leaving it alone. It's about making sure that we do the work we need to keep our forests healthy. I think I certainly am guilty of this, and many others are, who come from the environmental side and the side of people who regulate pollution, is we forget often to talk about the special places that need to be nurtured and preserved that offer the sink for our greenhouse gases. And we don't spend a great deal of time or money in the US actively preserving those places. Yeah. And I think that needs to change. So we need to invest in our forests and our farmlands. We need to invest in our oceans that we now know has real opportunity to act, to capture carbon and sequester it. We also know that we have an ability to educate our leaders to demand that kind of effort. And we need to remember that most of us are in democratic systems which demand that we get out and vote and actively participate in our democracy. If we don't, then there's no one else that's going to take our place.
Well, speaking of taking our place, a lot of people want to know if you've met Greta.
I have not. I regret that, but I will. I'll follow her around like everybody else, I think, and figure out how to catch up with her. I think she's a remarkable person, as we all know. I've spent a lot of time with some of the leaders of the various youth movements here. I've done the youth strike and done a lot of that. So I'm pretty familiar with what Greta stands for and the kind of movement she is heading. And I have to say, I'm both excited and distressed by it. I'm excited because I think it's where the energy is. I'm at NRDC to make sure that our view of how to act in the world is to capture that energy, to be forward-leaning and progressive in our demands, because nobody ever gets what you ask for. You get half of it, so I'm going to ask for twice as much, and really push the envelope. I'm distressed, though, because I think our effort to be clear about our anxiety about moving forward has really created a picture of cliffs in 10 years. Yeah. That may not be the way in which that motivates people to act, because none of us here can really say, I have the solution, this is where we need to head. And to demand that of anybody is crazy, yeah, because you need innovation. But I know how to get to tomorrow better. I know how to get to the next day. I know how to build a movement. And that's what we need to have. And so we need to take the youth energy, and instead of turning it into, a challenge where in 10 years, if we're not there, we're done, I think we need to turn it into a challenge to get to a better day tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. Because I am confident that change, if you look at the world, doesn't happen in incremental steps. it starts off that way, and all of a sudden, with the miraculous human spirit, it makes leaps and bounds. So just because I can't tell you how to move away from fossil fuels, which was our choice when we first discovered fire, I can tell you it is not the choice that we should be making tomorrow or the next day or the next day. We need to be smarter than that. It's not the future, and we will get there, even though I can't envision yet how that's going to be.
Yeah. I think that the inspiration to go out and make a change is fantastic. There are island nations like Kiribati and Tuvalu who feel that they're facing imminent threat.
Yep.
And who are trying to talk to the world from a position with very little power. So is there a way we can help them, or what do we do with that? The 1.5 degrees in Paris was acknowledging that particular,
Yes,
the
it was.
potential loss of those cultures.
Well, I'm not suggesting we either ignore the challenge or ignore our responsibility to the developing world and to those nations. They did not cause the problem they're now facing. We know who did. And we can't, wither away from that, and we have to address it. And part of the frustration I have is that, we are now, increasing our exportation of fossil fuels, as if when we do that, we don't have to count where they go and the emissions from those. So we're thinking maybe we're just increasing a little bit when that's not the case.
Yeah.
So we have to not just recognize that we did cause the vast majority of the problem. We continue to do that, and if we want to live in a world that's fair and equitable, then that equity needs to be that we have to reduce our emissions, and we need to do it now and at levels that are uncomfortable for us to think about.
So we've talked about trying to inspire people to action, but a question that's coming up again and again is, what's your view on the role that agencies such as NOAA and the Met Service and so on should have on directly developing climate change policies, and related to that in political environments that are hostile to that kind of activity?
Yeah, I knew that it would be a difficult transition back in January 2017 when I left Washington. I actually didn't anticipate it would be this difficult. Actually, let me say it right, this bad. I'm really worried about the federal agencies right now. I never thought I would be an advocate, which I'm now running an advocacy organization. I love it, I think it's great, but I spent my entire life in government. I worked in the local level, the state level, and the federal level. I've never met public servants that were as smart, as dedicated, or as committed as the people that I met at EPA. Every level of government has tremendous people in it. I am heartbroken for the fact that they are being treated as second-class citizens. They're being challenged in ways that are designed to make them leave the government, especially the scientists. It's the one thing that makes me angry, not just disappointed, because public service is the most noble profession, and there are not better people to run the government and move it forward than the public servants at those agencies. Yeah. That's it. And I think people here and elsewhere actually expect people to make decisions based on facts, to make decisions based on science, not seat of the pants, if I might say, bullying.
Yeah.
That's just not how we expect governing to work. And it's not what the public servants are going to support, because that's not how they're taught. That's not how they're brought up. That's not why they went into government. And so we have to defend them. We have to stand up, and we have to support them in every way we can. I had this brilliant I think, message when I was leaving EPA. It was so eloquent. People asked me what they should do, and I told them to keep their asses in their seats. Now, eloquent it is not, but I meant it. Because every time you leave a seat, somebody else is going to come in. You know, we have to help protect them. They have to know that we're still on their side. We have to be there for moral support. And we have to call it out when science isn't being followed and when the law is being broken. And we have to, litigate as much as we can and give our colleagues the kind of public support that they deserve. It's heartbreaking, frankly, right now. And I know that a lot of them are staying, and I thank them for it.
Absolutely.
And so, I had to live through some difficult times under the Bush administration when we were working on climate in the States. But I found that there were so many scientists at EPA under the radar screen in the closets that were working with us on these issues. And there's still a lot of folks doing the right thing, but they just need to keep their heads down. They need to stay there. And we will rise again, baby. We'll rise again.
So a number of people are asking, scientists are used to dealing in facts, talking in facts, and maybe uncomfortable coming out and translating in the kind of way you're advocating that we do. How do we get there from here?
Well, everyone is going to have to figure out what they're comfortable doing. And I know a lot of scientists, especially researchers. I love them dearly. But they're not sometimes the most gregarious human beings. They sort of like, I don't know what I mean. I mean, that's an overstatement, of course. But everybody just has to do what they're comfortable with. I'm not advocating that you get out of your comfort zone, and I'm not advocating that you stand up and face crowds of climate deniers and expect that the facts you put on the table will make a difference. There is now a vast majority of people that understand that the climate is changing. I used to get advice from the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, who was an individual that we argued a lot about a lot of things, but I loved him dearly. And he used to tell me that when you go to the farming communities in agriculture, talk about extreme weather, not climate change. Well, I think that's fine. And I did, but then they would be out fighting against climate change rules. So sometimes you have to listen, and sometimes you just have to buckle up and say the words that they may not want to hear. But I would not advocate, arguing with someone who's a staunch climate denier. I just think we need to get climate change to be spoken about more at our dinner tables, even if Uncle Harry is there and doesn't believe in it. Or Aunt Harriet, just get it into the ether, because it sort of just exists, folks, whether they want to talk about it. And honestly, there is a way of talking about the change we all want that is not controversial, that is a better world. And so there's many ways in which I think we can cut through the drama and get working with one another just on issues that present themselves, that we can all agree may solve climate change, even if that's not the reason why folks might be doing it. I don't think you need to wear your heart on your sleeve or put yourself at risk or in an uncomfortable situation. All I'm telling you is that people are dying for facts. Most people understand that climate is real and it's happening. And having you go out and really talk about this in ways that people can begin to understand can start the ball rolling. It may not seem monumental to you, but in some neighborhoods it will be what turns the tide. And frankly, I think that's where all the energy has to be and where it might work.
Yeah. So, we've been asked, or you being asked, which of the presidential candidates has the best ideas and policies on climate change and climate action?
You know, I've been asked that, and you know, I act like every politician and dance around it as much as humanly possible. And mainly because I have more than one friend running for that position, so I hate to disenfranchise anyone. You know, all the Democrats, the fun thing is that we used to, up until this election, even during the election when Obama was elected, we used to count climate success as one question. Yay! A climate question came up, or two. I think what I try to focus on is that everybody does seem to be putting plans on the table. Every one of them's different, which is great. Are any one of them as aggressive as I'd like to see? No. But will we get them there? I think so. So I'm going to take the cowardly route out. The route that doesn't disenfranchise the people that I know and love who are trying to be the next president, and just tell them all that they can count on one thing and one thing only, that I'll be annoying the hell out of them when they win. Maybe I should have just said that Governor Inslee had the best plan and leave it at that, because he was one of the first out. Oh, go figure.
Well, the overwhelming majority of the questioners here want to know, are you running for president in 2024?
Seeing as I'm so old and I'll forget my answer in 4 years, yeah, sure, no problem.
You heard it here first, folks. So I just want to thank you again for such a wonderful time. And I think you'll agree with me that Gina's set us off on an amazing path this week. This week we want to explore these kinds of complex issues and think about how we can be the change agents. And so, Gina, I thank you enormously
Jenny, thank you
for giving us this start to our week.
Thank you, everybody. I very much appreciate it. It was fun. Thank you.